I reflected on the series of events that had transpired over the previous few weeks. Despite my best efforts, I was unable to identify a single incident or pattern of behavior that would lead me to believe she was unfaithful. Instead, I felt a pervasive sense of unease, as if something was amiss. I sensed that something was happening, but I was uncertain about the nature of that something. I was convinced that something was going on, but I lacked the evidence and context to understand what it was. I had no concrete evidence, no clear indication of who, what, or where this was occurring. If this were indeed the case, I even began to question my own sanity. Am I reading too much into what is going on? Perhaps I am overreacting, imagining all sorts of scenarios in which she cheated, but with whom I had no idea. Nevertheless, I felt rather than knew that something was happening. It was as if I sensed the very beginning of an affair, perhaps even a one-time occurrence. As time passed, I became increasingly confident in my suspicions, although I was unsure how long I had been entertaining these thoughts. I had been dwelling on the situation for what seemed like weeks, but how long did it go on before I became even slightly aware that something was wrong? I took another sip of my JD, the ice clinking in the glass. The bartender signaled that it was time to pour more. I caught his eye and he nodded. He proceeded to slide along the counter and replace my glass with another double JD on ice. He smiled slightly at me, as if reading my thoughts. He had seen that look many times before. His gaze was supportive and at the same time compassionate as he recognized that my eyes displayed a pained look. The sweet taste of JD warmed my mouth and throat as I took another sip. I decided that I should calm down. I looked around the bar and noticed that there was a handful of other people drinking. The room was quiet, filled with the low hum of chatter. The words were unintelligible, but they added a background to my personal growing sense. The atmosphere was one of unhappiness masquerading as happiness. The customers in the bar were expressionless, with no one standing out as particularly noteworthy. They were all of a similar, average demeanor. The only woman in the establishment who appeared to be in her 40s was dressed in a manner that was slightly more formal than the norm for the time of day. She also seemed to exhibit a hint of desperation. He was treating her to drinks, and he appeared to be hoping for good fortune. Upon observing her, he did not have to try so hard, it seemed as though she already had his attention. The other patrons seemed to be simply passing the time while the rain fell outside, and this further dampened the mood. It was likely that each of them would soon run out of reasons to stay. In the sanctity of the bar, I was still undecided about my next move. What, then, was the story? I turned in the direction of the voice. She looked at me, and her eyes penetrated deep into my soul. I thought I opened my mouth to speak, but no words came out. She stood in the dimly lit bar, dripping with water, as she began. To remove her coat, Sammy, I was concerned about your well-being and had the notion that I might find you here, so I am here. Would you like to converse? I regarded her and attempted to regain composure as I observed her. Are you concerned about me? Why? What do you mean? I regarded her, attempting to comprehend her statement. I was preoccupied with thoughts of suspicion and distrust, questioning whether she was attempting to deceive me in some way. Could I truly place my trust in her? I took a sip of my Jack Daniels and ordered her a vodka and Coke, which the bartender served with a certain flair, his smile directed at the sight of Sammy. She caught his eye as he served her, returning his smile with one of her own, her expression suggesting a certain warmth and affection. Sammy waited until the bartender had departed before initiating further conversation. Her demeanor was cautious and uncertain, as though she was weighing her options. It was evident that she was grappling with some internal conflict, and her recent behavior seemed to reflect a sense of overwhelming concern. I was compelled to inquire as to the nature of the situation. I gazed into her brown eyes for a moment before averting my gaze. She consistently demonstrated an ability to perceive my thoughts and emotions with remarkable clarity. This quality was one of the aspects I found most appealing about her. We had a strong rapport and a mutual understanding. While we did engage in disagreements, they were not rooted in fundamental differences. We have always been direct and honest with each other, at least up to a point. What was left unsaid was simply understood. Sammy, I am fine, and we are fine. You have no reason to worry. Sammy took a slow sip from her glass and looked straight into my soul again. I was overcome with a sense of foreboding. She placed the glass on the table in front of her, clasped her fingers together, and leaned forward slightly towards me. I was acutely aware of the imminent revelation. I was determined to maintain my composure. I attempted to feign ignorance. "Steve, I am aware of the situation. Let us be forthright with each other and refrain from engaging in further subterfuge." The bartender overheard the concluding remarks and turned his head slightly to gain a better understanding of the conversation. He seemed to perceive the exchange as potentially interesting. "Let us relocate to a more private setting. The current location is too conspicuous, in my opinion." I observed a look of disappointment on the bartender's face. As we stood up and walked across the bar to one of the side booths, we sat opposite each other like prize fighters waiting for the other to strike. "I would be interested to hear your views on the matter. I have participated in the tournament, so I believe I have some insight. However, I am aware that I cannot lie to you. We have known each other for a considerable length of time, and I am confident that you will not deceive me. Therefore, I would be grateful if you could provide me with further details. It is evident that you require the assistance of a third party, therefore I urge you to divulge your thoughts. I have been acquainted with Sammy since the age of 17. She was a constant presence in my life and, at one point, held a romantic interest in me. At the time, I was dating her sister, Claire. Claire was 3 years older than me, and we began our relationship when we were both 20 years old. Despite the age difference, Sammy and I enjoyed a cordial relationship, a fact that often caused disquiet within her family. Despite their differences, their personalities were similar, as evidenced by the numerous disagreements between the sisters over the years. 2 years later, we were married and believed we had an ideal future. We both held respectable jobs and earned sufficient income to maintain a comfortable lifestyle. Sammy, my sister-in-law, had a carefree and enjoyable period in her late teens and early 20s. Now, at age 25, she was seeking a more mature and serious relationship. I felt that she had already experienced a significant amount of personal growth and was ready to pursue a more serious connection. Claire and I have been married for 5 years. In a month, we will celebrate our 5th anniversary. I found Sammy to be an attractive woman and considered her a close friend as well as my sister-in-law. I looked at her and my eyes began to fill with tears as I searched for words to explain how I felt. However, her words still reverberated in my mind, "I know you're hurting." She reached across the table and her fingers stroked mine before squeezing them tightly, a gesture of support. As I felt my heart slowly breaking, she said, "Steve, if you don't tell me, then I will." She then suggested that I might be cheating on him. I acknowledged that this was a possibility. I was at a loss as to how to respond. My eyes widened when I heard those words, but I still refused to understand as I stubbornly tried to make sense of what I knew and what it meant. I was determined not to hear anything more. If I didn't really know, then it couldn't have happened, and then it couldn't have hurt me. I wouldn't have to deal with it either. Sammy looked at me. She saw the glassy look I gave her. Was it shock or denial, Steve? I love you. It is imperative that you awaken from this state of unconsciousness. I am certain that this incident was the result of a misunderstanding. I attempted to conceal the item in my armpit and also attempted to deceive myself further. Sammy's eyes suddenly flashed with rage. She reached out and struck me with considerable force on the face. The bartender looked at me and ceased wiping the glass he was holding in his hand. I raised my hand to indicate that everything was under control. I raised my hand to my cheek, and the heat of the slap made it glow. I was sure Sammy's perfect handprint was visible as well. I apologized to Steve, but I must admit that his behavior sometimes drives me crazy. I care about him deeply, and I cannot bear to see him hurt like this. Therefore, I urge him to be wise and courageous. This situation is unfolding, and we need to take action. As the pain of her slap began to subside, I was able to fully comprehend the gravity of my situation. I will begin by stating that I am certain you are already aware of my suspicions, but I will proceed regardless. Several weeks ago, I was with her when she received a call on her cellular telephone. She excused herself from the room to answer it, which struck me as peculiar. After all, we are sisters, and there is no reason for her to conceal anything from me. I nodded, fearful of what I might hear, but as I sipped my Jack Daniel's Tennessee whiskey, she continued. I simply thought it was unusual, so when I had the opportunity, I checked her telephone. She was so trusting. I am unable to confirm the identity of the caller, who was known to her and introduced himself as Robert. I was unaware of any such individual, but I decided to monitor the situation to see if the caller made any further contact. I eventually discovered that the caller was, in fact, a man she had known years ago, before she began her current relationship. It would appear that the two individuals in question have been exchanging messages on a social network or chat site for a period of several weeks. However, I was not aware of this until recently. I was aware of some minor incidents that seemed to be occurring separately, but I did not consider them to be significant. I am aware that this may appear to be a trivial matter, but it seemed as though everything was falling into place for them. Therefore, I assumed that they were merely friends. The two were exchanging messages, reminiscing about past experiences. This appears to have been the genesis of their relationship. Are you suggesting that something untoward occurred? Did you fail to discern any suspicious circumstances? It seems that there were several factors conspiring to keep them apart, including a lack of opportunities for social interaction. Sammy regarded me with a look of disbelief, as if I were lacking in intelligence. In response, I stared back at her. You dearly, but it is imperative that you remove your head from your posterior. As her words became increasingly real, reality sank deeper into my drug-induced brain. I had assumed that this was a serious matter. I took another sip and gathered my courage. To what extent do you believe that this interaction occurred? Do you know? Sammy looked at me, her eyes sparkling, and then looked away for a split second. That was all the answer I needed. When, how, and where, I asked, my mind was now playing catch-up as I felt a state of heightened emotional distress began to manifest within me. The internal conflict between logic, common sense, and an instinctual, primal rage emerged. I had previously been uncertain about the nature of her interactions with him, but recently, I had confirmation that their relationship had progressed. I was having lunch with a friend who works with Claire when she inadvertently revealed this information. I did not outwardly display my distress at the time, and she concealed her own feelings effectively, so I did not pursue the matter further. It subsequently came to light that she had met with him on 2 occasions for lunch. Additionally, there was at least one instance of meeting for dinner during the previous week. Is this consistent with your observations? I observed her taking in her words. There have been a couple of recent occasions where I called her office to arrange a lunch meeting, and she was not present or had simply departed. Was this when she met him? Then, last week, she had a seminar that she was required to attend. It was announced late and scheduled for after work that evening. She returned home late after 12 o'clock. In reflecting on the past, she recounted that it had taken a considerable length of time, and the team proceeded to the hotel bar for relaxation before departing. Additionally, there was no sexual activity that night, and she also took a shower before retiring for the evening. My mind was in a state of turmoil, and my cognitive processes were perplexed by these distressing facts, each of which intensified the anguish and exacerbated the distress. I suddenly blurted out. Sammy looked at me, and now there was concern in her eyes. Steve, what are you going to do? Don't do anything that might result in legal consequences for you. I looked at her, and from the expression on her face, I knew that she had noticed the change in my demeanor. My face seemed like stone, and my heart was now a block of granite. My body was preparing for what was to come, and she could see it. I was prepared to put a stop to this, regardless of the circumstances. This would not be tolerated. I would not tolerate a cheater in my life. She would pay, and he would pay too. My eyes glazed over as rage bubbled up inside me. My muscles tensed, and my fists clenched. I had never been a violent person. I had had my share of. I had previously engaged in confrontations during my younger years, yet I had never actively sought out conflict. On occasion, it is necessary to take a proactive step and confront the truth, which is precisely what I did in this instance. I must admit that I was somewhat out of practice, but the situation demanded immediate attention. Steve, I urge you to reconsider your actions and take a step back. It is crucial to reflect on your choices and avoid hasty decisions. Without a well-defined plan, the situation could potentially spiral out of control. It is essential to engage in thoughtful deliberation. In addition, preparation is essential to avoid potential negative consequences. Her words initially provoked a strong emotional response, but they also prompted a shift in my rational thinking. This shift, though initially confusing, helped me regain a sense of calm. It also led me to recognize that my suspicions were, in fact, accurate. This realization reassured me that I was not losing touch with reality. Do you believe she is currently present? I observed Sammy and noticed her eyes beginning to well up with tears. The lonely path down her pretty face. I am aware that she is currently with him, which is why I have come to seek you out. I experienced a resurgence of rage, which prompted me to strike my fist forcefully against the table. Several individuals in the bar turned to observe the commotion. I raised my hand to the bartender, who responded with a similar expression. How is it that he is aware of my actions? Do you possess any knowledge regarding the exact location? I inquired, driven by a combination of hope and urgency. I am unsure. However, tomorrow I will speak with my acquaintance once more to ascertain any information I can. I am aware that he is married with children, although I am uncertain of his residence. Nevertheless, I will endeavor to find out if it proves beneficial. I grasped her hand, holding it firmly, and wiped a tear from her cheek. Thank you, Sammy. I am aware it is challenging for you, but I am truly grateful. I am genuinely appreciative. What is it, then? I am going to do so. She regarded me with concern. I am aware that I am unable to act according to my own volition, at least not yet. However, I will cease this action when I am ready to do so. This will be a definitive act, and there will be no recourse or retaliation. Nevertheless, they will both suffer consequences in the interim. I will retain what is rightfully mine. I will obtain the evidence I require to make an informed decision regarding my next course of action. Sammy regarded me with concern as I finished my drink. I caught the bartender's eye. He proceeded to pour an additional beverage for each of us as he approached. I discerned that Sammy wished to interject, so I raised my hand to forestall her. I then handed him a bank note, instructing him to retain the change for himself. He acknowledged my directive with a nod and departed. In light of these developments, I am compelled to inquire, how soon will you be compelled to confront her directly? I have a multitude of considerations to ponder. I intend to make a few telephone calls tomorrow while I attend to the matters at hand. If I am able to ascertain her identity, she will not receive any financial compensation from me. It is likely that you will find it challenging to interact with her. I am aware of that, but in any case, this has been the case for the last few weeks. If she has not noticed it now, it is unlikely that she will see any change. Sammy finished her drink in one gulp and stood up. I have to. Steve, I must insist that we speak again tomorrow. I will endeavor to ascertain all the information you require. She donned her coat once more and departed, accompanied by me. As she did so, I felt her press against me. She bore a striking resemblance to her sister. She looked up at me and I saw tears in her eyes as I kissed her cheek. I advised her to return home, assuring her that I would be fine and that I would contact her tomorrow. She smiled and turned away, and I watched her walk out the door. As the evening drew on, I took a deep breath and sat down, pondering my next move. One thing was clear, they would have to pay, and they would have to pay fast. It would be a harsh and unforgiving payment. I don't recall much after that. In some way, I found myself back in my own bed, my mouth feeling like the bottom of a parrot's cage. My head was still spinning when I lifted her from the bed. I rolled over and noticed that I was alone and CLA was nowhere to be seen. My senses were slowly awakening when I heard a noise downstairs. I swung my legs off the bed and attempted to get up. I was unsure of what I had done the night before. I staggered to the bathroom and began to recover from the effects of my alcohol consumption. I went downstairs in a haze of pain and my joints ached, everything seemed to hurt. In the kitchen, I observed her. Hello, my love. What did you do last night to get into this state? Would you like to know that I had a drink with an old friend? That is all. I got carried away. I sat down, poured myself some orange juice, and swallowed it. I then proceeded to consume another beverage of the same kind. Really? Who was that? Is there anyone you know who would have the audacity to engage in such behavior? My mind turned to Dawn. No, I do not think so. It was Bob. I knew him a long time ago. I have not seen him in years. In the intervening years, he had been in town for a couple of days on business. Bob. Something flashed across her face when she turned around. She confirmed that she was aware of the fact that they had attended college together and played football for a couple of years. He was a tall guy with dark hair. He still asked about her. Claire looked puzzled. She apologized, stating that she did not remember any Bob. However, the main point was that, have a pleasant time. Strike first. She was seated opposite me at the table. I looked at her, recalling my conversation with Sammy the previous day. What did you do last night? Was there anything particularly noteworthy? What time did you arrive? She met my gaze as she lied to me. Nothing particularly remarkable, really. I finished my work, and then the two of us went out for something to eat and drink. I was home by 9 o'clock. At 10 p.m., I began to express concern for your well-being. However, I was reminded that you had a late meeting, which likely explained your absence. I was still at home at that time, so I knew she was not there. At that point, I decided to take my leave, citing the need to attend to some personal matters. I informed her that I would be taking a shower and departing shortly. I may be delayed this evening, so please do not wait up. Bob had mentioned that he would be in touch. We still have some catching up to do. If he plans to stay for a few days, you should extend an invitation to him. It is always a pleasure to meet old friends. I will certainly do so. You must remember him fondly. She regarded me with a vacant gaze, her face attempting to conceal any emotional response. However, I sensed something. It may resurface at a later point in time. Now, if you would be so kind as to relocate, you will avoid any inconvenience. Do you require my assistance with transportation? I must confess that I consumed a modest quantity of alcohol last night. However, everything is under control. I still need to arrange for a taxi to retrieve my vehicle, which I believe I left at the bar. I am grateful for your understanding. After consuming additional orange juice and a couple of painkillers, I proceeded to dress myself. I departed the residence approximately 30 minutes later, while CLA was preparing. I had a full day ahead of me. I was certain that this situation would not persist for long. I resolved to. My fists clenched in rage as I contemplated CLA's involvement with this Bob character. I was determined to exact retribution and would do so with unwavering resolve. The work environment was chaotic, with a constant stream of calls requiring my attention. While some of these calls were routine, others demanded immediate action. Additionally, there were meetings I needed to attend, leaving me with no choice but to address these issues. By mid-morning, the initial rush had receded, and I had some time to attend to my personal concerns. I closed my office door and began to review my finances. I proceeded to consolidate my financial resources and transfer funds to a more secure location. Additionally, I scheduled an appointment with a legal professional to explore the possibility of a divorce. Given the limited time frame before the separation, I deemed this an opportune time to gather further information. While the outcome might not be significantly altered, it could potentially provide some leverage. Claire had her own financial accounts, so there was no immediate need to intervene there. However, I promptly addressed the issue of access to our joint account, ensuring that she would not be able to gain further control. The remainder of my funds were transferred to a secure account with a minimal balance. The majority of my assets were withdrawn and placed in a safe location. As we did not have children, a complete severance of our relationship would have been the most probable outcome. I concluded that the only way to move forward was for Claire to acknowledge her transgressions, seek forgiveness, and demonstrate restraint. This prospect made me melancholy. I sat at my desk, contemplating the events of the day and my actions. Did I require further information? I considered the implications of Bob's character and the evidence presented. Would the fact that I was aware of it be sufficient to incriminate both of them? My thoughts were interrupted by a phone call. This is Sammy. How are you, Steve? I'm busy with things. Thoughts, plans, and much more. I don't fully comprehend the situation, but I've made some progress. I've learned more about this individual from my friend. His name is Bob Stone, and he is married. I've also obtained his address and place of employment. I was able to gather this information without disclosing the circumstances surrounding my investigation. My friend is acquainted with CLA, and recently I observed her with him, according to her account. Despite their efforts to conceal it, the relationship is becoming increasingly evident. She inquired whether she had seen them together. I replied in the affirmative, noting that they were present at the RADA the previous evening, after the seminar. They remained after the other attendees had departed. She stated that they were at ease with each other. This is a promising development. I requested his contact information, as I intend to pursue this matter further. The uncertainty is causing me significant distress, and I am uncertain of my ability to maintain my composure. After providing her details, I was able to locate his social media profile and obtain his photograph. This prompted me to recall his face, although I was unsure of where or when I had seen it previously. I consulted my watch and noted that it was nearly lunchtime. I decided to contact the CLA to arrange a meeting or simply to initiate some form of interaction. I experienced a sudden sense of unease when I spoke to her. My heartbeat accelerated, and I felt a sensation of impending panic as she answered. "Hello, darling," she said, recognizing my number. "Hey, baby," she replied. "What are you doing for lunch?" I was curious to know if we could. "I am free if you would like to meet." "I'm sorry, but I have an appointment in 30 minutes that will last until the end of the day. In due course, you and Mr. Stones will receive the consequences of your actions. There will be no reprieve or mercy. The situation will be completely and irrevocably destroyed." "Yes, I am here. I apologize for the interruption. I was just thinking about something and got distracted. And I'll see you later." "Okay, bye. Love you. Bye." I terminated the call in a state of intense anger and sat with my jaw clenched when my secretary entered the room. "Steve, I'm going to that grocery store down the street. Do you want me to purchase something for you?" I thought for a moment and responded affirmatively. "Purchase me an item of your choosing. The primary objective is that it is substantial, and contains a considerable quantity of red meat." I feel inclined to sink my teeth into something. She regarded me with curiosity and nodded as she closed the door. It seemed to her that her superior was acting in a somewhat peculiar manner. He had been confined to the office all morning, conducting business in a perfunctory manner. However, there was something else. Something was brewing. She was certain of it. Sammy contacted her sister's office and proceeded to the lobby, where she observed her sister disembarking from the elevator and making her way towards the front door, accompanied by a tall, dark-haired man. The man was approximately 30 years of age, which was a couple of years older than she had expected. She had seen his photo on the internet and recognized him as Bob Stone. Sammy stood in front of her sister, who was taken aback by her unexpected appearance. Sammy inquired about her sister's reaction, noting her evident discomfort at having her plans for the day thwarted. She simply wished to visit her sister and perhaps have lunch. She smiled, her intentions seeming innocent. However, Mr. Stones informed her that he and Bob were having a business lunch, so she would have to come back another time. Mr. Stones extended his hand to her. "Bob Stones," he said. "Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you, Mr. Stones. How long have you known CLA?" He looked slightly confused by her question. "Listen, Sammy. We need to depart. We have a meeting. We will see you soon." Sammy smiled as she observed the couple exit the premises and enter a waiting vehicle. She noted her sister's gaze as the vehicle departed. I sat in my office, consuming a substantial portion of a pie, its filling comprised of red meat. I smiled as I slowly consumed it. Savoring the meal and considering her subsequent actions, Sammy confirmed that Claire had departed from her office. Consequently, I contacted her secretary and ascertained that she would be unavailable for the remainder of the day. From a financial perspective, this was highly advantageous, as all outstanding matters had been concluded. I had arranged for a locksmith and had agreed on the necessary requirements in advance. My lawyer was on edge and prepared to take action as soon as I provided the remaining information he requested. Tonight was the initial phase of my plan to engage with this couple for an extended period before taking decisive action. My father often advised me, don't let them know you're following them. Take the first route. Be straightforward and annihilate the adversaries. An individual who is reticent may be perceived as lacking directness. It was as though a recent memory had resurfaced, intensifying the imminent threat. I was at home when Claire arrived. She appeared attractive, exhibiting no unusual characteristics. Her scent was also unremarkable. The odor of men's cologne was unmistakable, though faint. She noticed that I was looking at her, but I did not speak. Instead, I kissed her lightly on the cheek and proceeded to the door. "Where are you going? Are you okay?" I am fine. I have a problem that I need to deal with. That's all. I'm just going to see Jerry. He extended an invitation to engage in a game of poker with a couple of colleagues. I considered it an opportunity to benefit from some positive social interaction. I closed the door behind me and, with a sense of determination, entered my vehicle and proceeded down the driveway. I drove to Jerry's residence and parked in front of his house. Jerry then escorted me through the door and into his garage. Jerry and I have a long-standing relationship. Given his long-standing relationship with the police, it was evident that Jerry had a history of trouble. However, his special combat training made him the ideal candidate for my purposes. A cage fighter, as he was known, Jerry was a large man, standing at over 6 feet tall and weighing approximately 198 pounds. He was built like a tank, with a personality to match. In terms of physical stature, he was imposing, yet we had been firm friends since our school days. I had contacted Jerry earlier and he had offered to provide assistance in any capacity, without any hesitation or condition. This level of support was precisely what we needed. We promptly proceeded to the garage, where I changed into dark overalls and a matching ski mask. We stood in silence, not uttering a word, as we climbed into the vehicle. The vehicle procured by Descript was unremarkable. As we traversed the city to the address provided by Sammy, we remained silent. Prior to embarking on this journey, we had established a format for communication. Therefore, there was no need for further discourse. Jerry brought the vehicle to a halt in the vicinity of Bob Stone's residence. There were no visible indications of life. The only source of illumination was the light within the vehicle. We waited in silence. Upon opening the front door, we observed him exit the premises, enter his vehicle, and proceed down the road. Jerry followed at a safe distance, as we were already aware of his destination. There was no urgency or panic, as there were no issues with parking at the training field. We remained in the vehicle while Bob Stone went to obtain his customary 50 female companion. It is noteworthy that he engaged in this activity on a weekly basis. It is indeed intriguing to learn such information. Through the use of the internet, we were able to locate a suitable location where we could relax. The radio was playing, and the melody of Kenny Rogers' voice was audible. Jerry directed his gaze towards me, and I began to speak. He then proceeded to turn off the radio. We continued to observe and wait. The internal tension I was experiencing was nearly unbearable. It was challenging to remain still and not engage in physical activity. However, it was a risky decision. The parking lot began to empty. The parking lot was nearly empty, with only a couple of other cars remaining. We both tensed up when we saw him heading towards his car. Jerry got out of the car and stealthily walked towards the target. Bob Stones was still getting over the last shot of his practice when he lifted the lid of his trunk and put his clubs inside. Jerry picked it up and stuffed it into the trunk along with the clubs. A well-aimed blow to the jaw was sufficient to render Bob Stones silent. Jerry, a professional cage fighter, gained the upper hand and, for the subsequent 30 seconds, Bob Stones experienced severe pain in the trunk of his own vehicle. Jerry was satisfied that he had used the human punching bag for sufficient time and then turned his attention to Mr. Stone's groin. Several blows from Jerry's fist caused Mr. Stone to yelp. Before he lost consciousness, he slammed the lid and promptly returned to the vehicle, where I proceeded to drive us out of the parking lot. The operation was a complete success. Jerry removed his gloves and mask. "Thank you," I said. "I am extremely grateful to you. Please do not worry about repayment. I am aware that I am in your debt, and I will never be able to repay you for what you have done for me. That is what friends are for. At least your hands were not broken, and there were no CCTV cameras in the parking lot, so it was a good outcome." As was previously agreed, we returned to resume the card game. The remaining participants were already present. We engaged in poker for the following 4 hours, without the use of high-stakes wagers. Our relationship was characterized by mutual trust and respect. The atmosphere was convivial, and all participants were aware of the circumstances and provided consistent support throughout. This experience instilled a sense of confidence in my abilities. I was also preparing to interact with Clara in a challenging manner. I entered the room shortly after 1 a.m. The time is 12 a.m. I exaggerated the quantity of alcohol I had consumed, and Jerry requested that one of the men deliver my vehicle. Claire remained awake and awaited my return. I considered it an appropriate time to engage in a performance worthy of an Academy Award. "Darling, why are you not sleeping?" I inquired. "I informed you that I would be a little late. Are you okay?" She regarded me with intensity. Jerry and the other men simply dropped me off in my vehicle, fearful that I might have struck JD with undue force once more. I threw my jacket onto I placed my coat on the coat rack and failed to secure it adequately. I then proceeded to sit down on the sofa and observe Claire. She was seated with her arms crossed over her chest, displaying a look of disgust. I returned her gaze with bulging eyes and a blank expression. I was at a loss as to what she had just said. I was filled with the urge to interject, but I remained silent. What was the nature of her statement? I was curious to know more. "Steve, is there someone else or something else going on? You have been acting rather strangely lately. Recently, I have experienced a shift in my emotional state, characterized by a tendency to laugh and a sense of mounting anger. However, I have been able to suppress these feelings. Steve, I am coping well. I have been facing some challenges recently, but I believe they will soon subside." CLA and I had a conversation. I sensed that she was uncertain about my well-being, but she seemed to perceive a certain underlying tension. We went to bed. I feigned unconsciousness, and it appeared to be an effective strategy. She became enraged and was prepared to take action, but I did not engage. The following morning, Claire was the first to rise and prepare coffee. I descended the stairs in a state of apparent disrepair, as though I had suffered from a hangover. I entered the kitchen and greeted her with a cheerful, "Good morning, my love. How are you?" She responded with a calm demeanor and informed me that she had recovered her faculties. I inquired about the possibility of taking medication for the headache. She then proceeded to administer medication while I sipped my coffee. She appeared to be calm, but I observed her phone on the kitchen table and surmised that she had likely received a call. Claire noticed me looking at her phone and seemed to be considering reaching for it, but ultimately decided against it, as it would have appeared unusual. I then poured some more orange juice and, in a casual manner, picked up the phone, which caused her to display a look of panic. This seemed to convey the message that she wanted to respond to the call, but was unable to do so due to the low battery. I quickly glanced at it and then returned my attention to my coffee. I quickly accessed the device and then extended it to her, indicating that it needed recharging. I was reluctant to receive any messages indicating that the battery was low. I subsequently left the kitchen and proceeded to dress. Claire appeared to be monitoring my actions as if she was aware of something significant that had transpired. Bob had not texted her that morning, a departure from his usual practice over the past few weeks. However, she was unable to discern the reason for this change in behavior. The relationship had been characterized by a high level of physical intimacy, which had persisted for several weeks. There had been multiple instances of shared meals, including lunches and dinners, as well as overnight stays at a hotel on 3 occasions. The woman in question perceived these activities as innocuous and inconsequential, deeming them nothing more than harmless entertainment. She assumed that her husband, Steve, would remain unaware of her actions. However, this recent realization prompted her to reflect on the frequency of her sexual encounters with her husband. She was unable to recall the last time they had engaged in sexual intercourse. Perhaps this was the underlying cause. She felt the need to take action promptly. She was so absorbed in Bob that she failed to notice what was occurring right in front of her. The only certainty that could arouse Steve's suspicion was that she was neglecting her duties. I descended the stairs with haste and nearly exited the residence when CLA attempted to seize me for a more passionate kiss than usual. I acknowledged her gesture with a wave and a smile as I departed for work at approximately 11 o'clock. The time is 12 a.m. I sent a text message to CLA, purely for my own amusement. "I apologize for my behavior today, my love. I have a great many thoughts, but I am confident that everything will be resolved soon. I love you." I sat back in my chair, waiting for something to happen just after lunch. Sammy called to me, "Steve. What on earth has happened? What are you asking?" "Sammy. Bob Stones was found beaten in the boot of his car by a golf club employee earlier today. Claire informed me of this development. She expressed profound disbelief. I advised her that such incidents are not uncommon in the present era and that the impact is particularly distressing when the victim is someone we know. However, I cautioned against overreacting. "You did it, didn't you?" I was taken aback. "Was he seriously injured?" "I cannot say that I am particularly distressed about the financial implications. Nevertheless, I did not resort to violence. He is just a minor." I was informed that there were a few superficial injuries, including cuts and bruises, but no broken bones. I inquired about the circumstances surrounding her discovery. She stated that she had an appointment with him for today and that his company received a call from the hospital informing them that he was admitted. His wife also called them. This account is both endearing and plausible, but it is also somewhat implausible. It is possible that in the future, it will not be so easy for all of them. "What do you mean, Steve, accidents?" That night, I returned home to find Claire absent, her vehicle missing, and no message. I called her phone, inquiring about her whereabouts. She replied cheerfully, "I'm in the hospital visiting a friend. I'll be back soon. I'm on my way right now." I hoped she was recuperating. I ended the call before she could say more. After a period of approximately 30 minutes, she returned home. Her complexion appeared ashen and haggard. I inquired as to the condition of her friend. I expressed hope that the situation was not too serious and that she would be discharged from the hospital soon. Claire regarded me as if she were about to speak, but then changed her mind. She informed me that there was nothing particularly alarming about her friend's condition. The friend had merely fallen and sustained some severe bruising. We would be returning home in a few days. She then proceeded to serve me coffee. Claire acknowledged my gratitude with a brief look as she sipped her coffee. The previous night, one of our company's representatives had been attacked. She paused, awaiting my response. "Oh, my God. What happened?" "He was beaten and left overnight in his car. I hope the police catch whoever did this." "Is he okay?" "Yes, fortunately, Bob wasn't hurt too badly. The incident appears to have been an unprovoked assault with no apparent motive. There was no theft." "This is the same Bob that you previously stated you did not know." She became aware of my observation and attempted to conceal her mistake. However, it was too late. She also became aware that I was aware of her mistake. She then proceeded to exit the premises in a hasty manner, presumably to change clothes. I suspected she might answer the phone. Secondly, I decided that I needed to reconsider my plan of action, given the accelerated pace of events. I needed to initiate a new course of action. I called out to CLA, who was ascending the stairs, and informed her that I required a brief absence to attend to a matter of some urgency. I requested that she not be unduly concerned and that I would return shortly. I proceeded to Bob Stone's residence and knocked on the door. It was opened by a diminutive, dark-haired woman. A woman with dark hair stood before me. "Mrs. Stone, I am aware that we have not yet had the opportunity to become acquainted, but I feel compelled to inform you of a matter of some delicacy. Might I be permitted to enter for a brief period of time?" She regarded me with a combination of nervousness, curiosity, and caution. I introduced myself as Steve Ryland, noting that my wife's name was CLA Ryland, and that she was engaged in an extramarital relationship with her husband. I then paused, awaiting her response. Her face displayed a combination of awareness and horror. She moved away from the door and led me inside to the living room. I surmise that this has something to do with both of them. I could already discern the pain growing in her eyes. Indeed, they were having an affair, and I discovered this a few days ago. I regret having to tell you about this. Additionally, I am aware that he is currently hospitalized. She appeared to shrink internally and her head dropped to her chest as tears flowed freely for several seconds. I had an inkling that he was at it again. She stated, "I am going to divorce CLA. She has had sufficient opportunities to confess everything, and I am no longer willing to tolerate her lies. I am uncertain how long this lasted, but it is sufficient for me that she has betrayed me and that I am unable to forgive or forget." Might this have something to do with the beating he suffered last night? I looked into her pleading eyes and quickly decided on my actions. I am unsure about that. I did not even lay a finger on him. It happened so quickly that I myself am still in shock. Whoever did this is fine with me. I must concur, my sentiments precisely mirror his. Might he also be engaging in flirtation with another woman's spouse? I am at a loss to comprehend the rationale behind such actions. I am disinclined to entertain any further interactions with him. I have reached my limit. This is precisely why we returned to this place. He has betrayed me. I have severed ties with her, and she continues to exhibit a vehement animosity towards me. I have provided her with the contact information of my locksmith and lawyer. I promptly entered my vehicle and proceeded to the medical facility, situated a mere 10 minutes away. I reached my destination with remarkable swiftness, and as I traversed the lobby, I observed a notable shift in my demeanor, as if a burden had been lifted from my shoulders. I proceeded to the elevator and ascended to the 4th floor, where I located the patient, Mr. Bob Stones. Upon locating him, I promptly sought out the patient's room, only to discover that he was in a side room. I proceeded unnoticed past the nurse's station and entered the room, closing the door behind me. Upon entering, the patient regarded me with a questioning look. I approached his bed and observed his bandaged face. One eye was closed, the other was bloodshot. I noted that he was attempting to focus. I considered the care he had received and concluded that it had been exemplary. I then turned my attention to the patient. He appeared to be in a state of considerable distress. I am not familiar with you, Bob. I will allow you some time to reflect. I smiled at him when he looked at me comically. I sat on the edge of his bed as he looked at me through the bandages on his face. I could only see one very black and swollen eye, and it appeared as though he had problems with his jaw as well. That is irrelevant. I observed the raised bedding supporting the weight of his lower body. It appeared to be in a state of disrepair. It was unsanitary and caused discomfort. It was at this point that I took the emergency button from him, throwing it under the bed. I then proceeded to poke him in the ribs, which elicited a high-pitched squeal. This prompted you to consider the possibility that I might be someone else. Do you require further clarification? I would suggest that you reflect on the numerous instances where you have engaged in sexual intercourse with married women, and the potential consequences of such actions. This line of thinking might prove beneficial. Alternatively, you could consider the number of marriages you have initiated, and the potential impact of your actions on these unions. This approach might also prove fruitful. This was sufficient as a starting point. His eyes met mine, and I could discern that his mind was in a state of flux as he attempted to reconcile the disparate pieces of the puzzle. Another minute passed as I awaited his response, eager to witness his distress and confusion. Another clue, little Bobby, I suggest you try this. I am married to a woman named CLA. Will it prove effective? I observed the light bulb moment when he realized who I was. He appeared to understand the situation fully. I smiled, displaying my satisfaction. Dinner, he nodded slowly. I'm glad we've got this sorted out now. He then inquired about the reason for my presence. Yes, of course it is, I replied. I came to deliver a message from your wife. I informed him that the divorce would be sent by mail. Additionally, I stated, I wish you well. I observed a tear flow from his only eye. I began laughing, and he was unable to move. I continued laughing as I watched him struggle. I leaned over him and looked into his one eye. I informed him that I was divorcing my wife because she had fun with a man like him. This was just the beginning for him. I assured him that we would meet many more times. He could be sure that I would ruin him. Your life is analogous to mine in that I will persist in my actions until you cease your own. I suggest you begin to flee. Furthermore, I did not attack you for my own gratification, I wanted him to wonder who it was. I raised my fist as he watched and slammed it hard into his one open eye. I felt something crunch. It was not a significant injury, and then I received another quick blow to my testicles. He screamed and then lost consciousness. I left the room, gratified but not entirely satisfied. He was forced to acknowledge his misdeed and the impossibility of rectifying it. No witnesses observed my departure. Had they done so, they would have noted the smile on my face. I proceeded to my residence at a leisurely pace, intending to address the residual issue of my anger. I had managed to control my inner rage because, once the retaliation commenced, it would simply become a course of action that would run its course, which I would follow and enjoy for the most part. I was sad at the end of my marriage, but as much as I was hurt in that moment, I knew that I would never be able to return to her after her betrayal. My only consolation was that the parties who had hurt me would experience it to a much greater extent. I do not forgive. There was a note on Bob Stone's card that we would meet again. I parked my car in the driveway of the house. Claire's car was parked where she had left it, no more than 2 hours ago. I was absent-minded. I made a brief, absent gesture with my hand as I passed her on my way to the front door. I inserted the key into the lock and considered the possibility that this might be my final act as a married man. My heart suddenly felt like lead as I walked inside. It was as if all the worries of the last few days suddenly became real and incredibly heavy on my shoulders. As I approached the living room, I heard the TV murmuring. In the corner of the room, I stood motionless, observing her. Cla sat perched on the sofa, her behavior filled with fear and trepidation. It seemed as if she was waiting for the axe to fall, as though she sensed that something was wrong. It was as if the game was over, but nothing had been said yet. She was trembling with excitement, trying to remain calm. I stood and watched her. She raised her head, and I saw fear in her eyes. Her mouth I attempted to verbalize a response, but was unable to do so. I proceeded into the room and then past her, retrieving a beverage. I placed my glass, containing a substantial quantity of whiskey with ice, on the coffee table between us and sat down. I observed her, taking in her fear, and perhaps detecting a hint of defiance as well. I remained silent as I reached for my drink and took a slow sip. The beverage warmed the back of my throat as it slid down my throat. He gazed at her without blinking, waiting for her to make the first move. I took another sip of my drink, remaining silent. My face was expressionless as I observed the woman I held dear staring back at me. My heart still throbbed with deep feelings for her, but now it was balanced by the pain she had caused me for no apparent reason. I was certain she would soon begin to feel my pain. I stared at her, but she saw nothing in my face that would give her any reason to believe I was at all repentant. There is a reason for optimism, as much has already been said between us without any words at all. Claire seemed to pull herself together and straighten up as she apparently decided to be bold. She had no idea what I knew and could no longer bear the accusing silence. "Where did you go?" Her eyes betrayed her concern, while I sat motionless and silent. "Talk to me," she stammered. I took another slow sip of my JD. I really love JD. After a busy day, I observed her becoming increasingly distressed. "What is the matter with you, Steve?" she demanded, visibly irritated by my silence. "Okay, CLA. I will divulge the location I visited if you are willing to do the same," I replied. She regarded me with a hint of hesitation and fatigue, as if her mind was engaged in a fierce internal debate. She seemed uncertain about the next move, wary of a potential counterattack. "I told you I was in," I stated. "The hospital and visiting a friend. What does all of this mean?" She leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms, pleased with her first throw. I took another slow puff of my JD. "Honey, I just knew you would say this. Do you want to try again?" She watched my calm speech, and I saw fear flash in her eyes. Now she was scared. "I was with my friend, as I already said. What is wrong with you?" And again, she thought, she had brushed. I disregarded the question and redirected the discourse back to me. "CLA, I have had sufficient of this vacuity. I shall elucidate the location to which I proceeded. I was visiting an acquaintance with whom I was previously unacquainted. The information I was conveying to her was of paramount importance. I had not even met her previously, but I can now confirm that we have established a certain degree of familiarity." I observed her countenance with great attention. I could discern that she attempted to maintain composure, but her defiant demeanor betrayed her. I engaged in an illuminating discussion with her about her husband, Bob Stone. "Perhaps you are familiar with him." I observed the curtain begin to slide. It appeared that her husband had been involved in an accident and had been hospitalized. The injuries were not life-threatening, consisting primarily of severe bruising. "This is a favorable outcome." Claire's face flushed as she sensed the net tightening around her. In a manner that indicated my intention to engage her in conversation, I proceeded to inquire as to the purpose of my visit. CLA was aware of the reason for my visit, yet hesitated to voice it. It appeared that her husband had a proclivity for infidelity. I had discovered his infidelity and felt she had a right to be informed. She expressed her dismay, as though a noose were tightening around her throat. I inquired as to her well-being. May I offer you something to drink? Are you aware of the details surrounding Bob Stone's romantic involvements? My dear, I sipped my beverage while she attempted to articulate her thoughts. However, her mouth remained silent, and no words emerged. Allow me to assist you in this endeavor. I gazed intently into her eyes, hoping to convey my profound emotions. At that moment, her eyes widened, and her hand flew to her mouth as the realization struck her with great force. I observed her face as she turned to me, her expression a mixture of shock and disbelief. She was seeking at least some degree of support but saw nothing on my face. I know about you and Bobby, baby. I have known this for a while, not long but long enough. If you have something to say, I suggest you do it now before you go. I emptied my glass and stood up to pour another. Are you sure you don't want a drink? I asked in a much calmer tone than I actually felt given the circumstances. She nodded. I poured us both a large drink and sat back in the chair opposite her. Claire took a long sip and then looked at me. I was unsure how to respond. I knew that our encounter was merely sexual, but I was struggling to reconcile this with the vows we had exchanged. I felt anger boil inside me when she mentioned the traitor cliché. However, I was determined not to let this affect me. I reminded myself that this was just sex. Steve, it just happened. Are you serious now? It never happened. Such occurrences typically transpire without much ado. Typically, two individuals decide to engage in sexual intercourse. They plan and agree to remove their clothing. They plan the location and time. Do not treat me like a fool. You and Bobby have already cuckolded me for a few weeks or perhaps months, but no more. Go to hell, both of you. The event only occurred twice, and that was not particularly enjoyable. The mere thought of it was thrilling, but the act itself was not pleasurable because I was constantly concerned. I had long feared that you might discover our secret, and I am now forced to admit that my suspicions were correct. I hope that you will find it in your heart to forgive me, Steve. I am truly sorry for what I have done. I want you to know that it meant nothing and that I am willing to do whatever it takes to make amends. I will make you happy again, and I will do whatever you ask of me. As I stood there, I heard myself laughing loudly and maniacally. I was struck by the thought that had just flashed through my mind: this could be serious. It was a mistake. We can fix this. I am sorry, yes, absolutely. You are my love. I am sorry that you were caught. Would you have ceased your actions if you had not been caught? I believe not. The old clichés fall so easily from the lips of a cheater. Just like all the lies you have told me and others since this began, it has become second nature to you. You are the only person who will accept the individual in question is not the woman with whom I fell in love and married. I no longer recognize her. She looked at me, and I saw through her deceptive facade. This was serious. What can I do? What will I do? It's okay. We're done. While I was gone, I called Sammy by. She is aware that she will be arriving shortly to collect you, but I am uncertain as to where I should go. Are you attempting to evict me? She regarded me with a look of shock as she began to collect herself. You are free to go wherever you wish. Even back to the hospital to see your boyfriend, if you wish. I am indifferent to your movements. The crucial thing is that you leave. We are finished. I have reached the end of my patience. I finished my drink and placed the glass on the table with a resounding thump, thereby emphasizing the conclusion of the conversation. Claire sat looking at me, seemingly stunned. When there was a knock on the door, I stood up, walked over, and greeted Sammy. How did everything go? She asked as we entered the living room and looked at her sister, who was now sobbing. Cease shaking your shoulders. Expedite her departure. I am sorry for being forthright, but if she does not leave, I am uncertain of my ability to interact with her in a civil manner. Despite my disdain for her actions, I still care about her. I request your assistance in this matter. I will contact you at your earliest convenience. I poured myself another drink. While Sammy was occupied with packing Claire's belongings for the following few days, I listened to my wife's anguished cries while observing her sister gathering her belongings and placing them into a couple of suitcases. It took less than 10 minutes to evict her from my residence. A longer and more arduous process would be to sever my ties with her entirely. I will forever erase the pain. Retribution will help with this. That was all I had to wait for now, plus another hardcore JD. I looked at the flames of the funeral pyre I had built in the backyard. Everything that belonged to Claire was now on fire. There is no way I would let that come back into my life. I have completed the bottle and discarded it into the fire. Subscribe to our channel to avoid infidelity and proceed with the subsequent narrative, which is of a more profound nature than the preceding one. If you are below the age of 18, abstain from listening to the subsequent narrative.